that easily contradicts this statement. Hello. I'm here talking to myself. We're live, 7:59. I'm a little bit late. Tonight we're going to talk about we're going to go behind the scenes on the 427 LS7 base crate motors. I keep wanting to call it a stroker. I guess technically it's not. It is if you compare it to a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 6.0 or even a 6.2. Normally we put the 4-inch stroke cranks in these things to make stroker versions of these, but this was a factory one. Although this one was not technically a factory LS7. So those are a couple of things that I want to clear up for tonight, because I got a lot of comments on this. It's a popular video, which is good. It was a lot of fun doing it. Thanks, Bob, for bringing the motor down and testing with Eric at West Tech. And he made short order of tuning this thing and getting it all right. You know, drive-by-wire, knock sensors, all that stuff. And the cool thing is we got to run knock sensors on it. And I haven't done that before with the Holly. So we could register knock counts and see what was going on, see if it was activating, see if it was pulling any timing. And it wasn't through any of these runs. We were able to ran it on 91 pump gas. We were able to run 29 degrees of timing, I think is the most that he tried at the horsepower peak, which you're not going to really get detonation there. You're more likely to get it at the torque peak. But, you know, being able to run them cold like we are, it was 130 or so, I think probably. We made one run down very cold trying to search for our big power number. But it was usually higher than that, 130-ish or so. I think was 130, 140, kind of where we normally do. And then that combined with the cold air going into the dyno cell, you know, not a problem getting all that stuff. And then 91 octane, we could run that with full timing and not have any problem. And we know that even without running knock sensors on these things, which I don't normally do. We don't, even if they're there, we don't really hook them up. But on this crate motor, it had all that stuff. So we ran all that stuff. And like I said, Eric did a great job getting everything tuned very quickly. And, you know, he's the go-to guy there. So we did have it hooked up. And even if we didn't have it hooked up, if there was no knock counts or nothing showing us, hey, the knock sensors were not activating, if it's audible knock, we can hear that if we're in the room, but you can see it on the printout. I mean, you can see it on the power curve. If the thing's detonating, if it's rattling, it's at the very least going to be misfiring. And so we'll see, you know, that sort of erratic behavior on the curve. This thing was like perfectly smooth. You can hear misfires when you're running the motor on the dyno, especially if you are listening. You're like, oh yeah, there's something going on at the top. And you look at the power curve, there's something going on at the top. Oh, it's like really rich at the top. Well, then we have the airfield data, but it's nice to know that you're like, oh yeah, it sounds like it's laboring at the top or whatever. So you can get through all that stuff. It's even better to have the knock sensors there working like they're supposed to, but they're telling us that the thing that we're looking at is really happening. And so all that's good. So this particular 427 was not an LS7, was not a factory LS7. So not a factory LS7 with the LS7 dry sump setup. This was a wet sump motor. It was an LS7 block. It was a 4-inch. It was a steel crank. It did have titanium rods. It had hyper-protected pistons like the factory stuff. This one had CNC ported LS7 heads on it. It had 1/8 rockers on it, the offset rocker for the LS7. It had a factory LS7 intake manifold. It had a factory drive-by-wire throttle body. We obviously ran the dyno headers on it. We had the Mazir electric water pump on it, and it was tuned with the Holly. It was run with the injectors that came with the motor, and we were just running pump gas on it. So the injectors were more than big enough. The motor was it was 11-to-1 static compression. The motor was rated at 570 by GM, and maybe the way that they test it, that, you know, my guess, and this is what I would do if I were them, is that I would underrate these motors so that they always make the power output the way that anybody's going to test them. Because not very many people, I don't think, because this is rated at the flywheel and not the wheels. So it's rated the way that we're testing it, but in a little bit different procedure. Now, the way that they rate it might be with stock exhaust manifolds. It might be with full accessory. It might be with air intake. It might be more like what they do when they're doing a factory motor, although I would kind of doubt that. but it definitely is a different procedure than we were using. Maybe they don't run it as cold as that. Maybe they don't run as much timing as we do because of that. There could be a lot of things, but we know that I mean, almost immediately, like on the first pull, it made what the factory rating was. We're like, oh yeah, this thing's going to do more than that. And naturally it did. And if you look at the power curve was beautiful. The torque curve was beautiful. There was no hiccups on it. The thing ran clean. There were no misfires. You know, it did all the things that we wanted to. It sounded amazing. It revved out. You know, it did all that. So I had some interesting comments like, why don't you just rev this thing out? How come it can't rev higher? I'm like, well, it can, but the physical ability to run more RPM is detrimental, because if you're way past the power peak, there's no reason to be running it out there just because you want to hear, I don't know, glorious RPM sounds. Quite honestly, when things on the downside of the power curve, it doesn't sound as good when you rev it out there anyways. It sounds good when it's charging hard and continuing to make power because you got the short runner intake manifold on it and you got lots of cam timing in it. And this one had reasonable amount of compression, but even more compression would be even better, you know, because if you're going to go up with a bigger cam, you got to put that static compression, because all those things go together. As we know that they don't really, that's not really a thing. But and one of the things I asked in the video was like, I'm like, okay, well, if you wanted to make more power, this thing is going in a car that's driving around. It's not a daily driver, but it is definitely a driver. So the AC and all that stuff on there. So it's something that's going to go in and wants to be driven around. And this 227 cam shaft is what I think was in there. That one that was in there had a, you know, it had a decent idle. You could hear it. You could hear it had a cam in it, but it's a big motor. A 227 cam in a 5.3, in a 4.8, it's a pretty big cam. In a 5.3, a little bit less. 6.0, a little bit less. 6.2, a little bit less. And a 427, a 227 cams, not really that big. But it is quite a bit bigger than the factory LS7 cam, 211, 230 or something like that, with a really wide LSA, 120 plus degrees LSA. And so it's a lot bigger than that. So this makes more power than a factory LS7 is going to with that smaller camshaft. But there are lots of things that you could do to make more power. We could put a much bigger camshaft in. There's room for way more camshaft than that. There's more piston to valve clearance for more camshaft that we could put in. It already has enough head flow, so I don't think I'd do anything to cylinder heads. The intake manifold, there's definitely power in there. We know that the factory LS7 manifold is restrictive. So a fast, I think I would honestly choose an MSD over the fast. In our testing, the MSD seemed to do better. If you want short runner, high RPM stuff, because that's what they do, single plane or short runner, high RAM, whatever, that kind of thing, you could put that on there and make more power on the top, you know, less on the bottom. You could trade that, but all that stuff is possible to make even more power to get this thing, you know, really kind of wicked up. The thing I want to talk about for tonight is why did we spend so much time, you know, trying to go after 1 or 2 horsepower? Well, there's a couple of reasons. The biggest reason is because we're guys, and that's what we do. We're dyno guys, we're horsepower guys, we're just guys. I mean, that's normal for us. You know, if you see something, and when you were a kid and you had a bike and you found a piece of wood, you're like, oh, that's definitely going to be a jump. We're definitely jumping over something. And then you end up jumping over your buddy's lay down. You end up jumping over your buddy or whatever, because you're a guy. That's what guys do. And so, and then the other thing, the stirring that pot a little bit, was the fact that this thing ran, and then we were seeing numbers like, you know, 609.7. Like, really? You can't. And the worst thing is, a lot of times you see, when you're making the pull and you're watching the digital readout for the dyno, it may show a 610. And had it done, and had that 610 number came on the printout, we probably would have just been done and left it at that and be like, okay, that's perfect. That's more than it's rated at. The curve is perfect. The thing sounds great. It's all fantastic. Let's call it a day. That's like, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 runs or whatever with Eric tuning all this stuff. Because he went in and after he did the power runs, he went in and tuned the drivability for the drive-by-wire throttle and all that stuff, just so that you could put this thing in and it would work and drive around and do all that stuff. And then, you know, if you wanted to come in for a chassis dyno session and dial everything in, that's certainly possible. But the thing would go in and work and not have any problems. But instead, we get a 609.7, and we're like, oh no, it's making 610. So we sat around figuring out ways. There are a lot of things that we could do. We didn't want to you know, we don't want to put nitrous on it or turbo or, you know, anything silly like that. But there are lots of little things that we could do. We could have went to a lighter weight oil. That certainly could have helped. We ended up doing a hero run by getting lots of temperature in the oil, get the oil thin like you would with a thinner oil, and then let the water cool off, because since it has an electric pump, you can make a couple of runs, get oil temperature in it, shut the motor off and let water circulate, and fairly quickly you can get the water temperature down, you know, so then you can make a run and go, okay, it's got hot oil, which is good because it makes more power with hot oil. And then it's got cold water, which also makes more power with cold water. So that's like the last hero run that you could do. But we wanted to try something else. And so we came up with this radius air entry for the throttle body. Now, and that seemed to help. It seemed to help, you know, a little bit. But honestly, what this thing needed was, you know, we didn't see a lot of, we did see, because I asked Eric about this. I said, well, what kind of vacuum do we see in here? And we saw a slightly falling KPA during the run. So we know that it's not terribly restrictive. Like, it didn't go from 100 down to 80, but it dropped by, let's say 3 KPA. So I'm like, okay, there's something there. That intake manifold, we know that there's power to be had there. Not just from a flow standpoint, but from a design standpoint. So different runner lengths, tuning the power at different RPMs and all of that. But also from a bigger throttle body. I mean, if we're over 600 horsepower, I think it's time to go up from a 90 millimeter throttle body to 102 or 105. But you need the intake manifold to go with that. So since the throttle body itself was probably restrictive, I didn't think that there was going to be big gains to be had by putting a radius air entry on a throttle body that probably was still undersized already. But we were looking for less than 1 horsepower, and we were going to great lengths to try to get it. And in the end, we ended up doing it. The radius entry definitely worked. And then we did our hero run. So it ended up like at 613 or something. So a little over 613. And so it did that. But the problem is that, you know, you do that, you get a 609.7, and then we got a 611.9. We're like, well, we can't now leave that 611.9 as a 611.9 because it's a 611.9. It needs to be a 612. And so it goes, and so it goes. And then you keep trying to, you know, eventually you'll get to a point where, hey, it's just like, look, that's enough. Okay, you guys, that's it. Unless you're going to go with Q or wave the magic nitrous wand over it or whatever, that's what it's going to do. And that's, you guys got to be happy with that, because that's still already way more than the thing was rated at. The motor's running perfect. Bob took his motor and left happy. And that's really what the thing is. That's the important part, is he's got a great motor. And this is one of the, you know, this is one of the great things about crate motors. And that's that they do what people say that they're going to do, particularly from GM, because obviously they don't want to have people complaining and they don't have comebacks and warranty issues and stuff. So we know that it's going to do that. And, you know, an LS7 headed 427, it's just not that hard to make, really, you know, lots and lots of power. So let's see what you guys got going on. Eric Miller, Niner. Flat broke. I saw it. That's why my brain went 2-liter 4-cylinder turbo. Did I not put that in there correctly? Is my description wrong? Awesome test. I own this engine. My car made 517 wheel horsepower, 463 foot-pounds. It's kind of right on what it should be, right? Was a GM crate motor. It was a GM crate motor. Bone stock out of the box. Chevrolet Performance parts. Yep. Do I hook up 2 sensors on the cold air ducts on a double throttle body Sniper cross ram intake, or will it readily correct with one side hooked up? What 2 sensors are you talking about? Are you talking about a mass air meter? It's a reworked LS7 from the factory. I have paperwork from Chevy saying it's a rework, adding a different cam and converting to wet sump. Paperwork came with the motor. I know, but it's not a factory LS7. They've changed a lot of things on it. It has a different camshaft in it. It's no longer a dry sump. So it is an LS7 block. An LS7, like I said, LS7 titanium rods and pistons and that stuff. But the camshaft is definitely different, and the oiling is definitely different. LS have EPA constraints. A crate motor's not going to have that. These motors were off-the-shelf wet sump LS7s converted by Chevrolet Performance to a wet sump when they changed the cam. Motor came with a line item list of parts that are swapped. You only need a 400 horsepower to go 130 miles an hour. Even if power is past the peak, you could still go faster. Is my reasoning wrong? Well, Dan, if you need 130, if you need 400 horsepower to go 130 miles an hour, yeah, by the way, that wouldn't be accurate, but I'm hoping that that's just an example. If you needed that to go faster, if you go past the power peak, you would want the power peak and that 130 miles an hour to occur at the same engine speed. If you go past that, if you could rev past that, you would go faster because there's gearing, but you might not be able, it might not rev past there because it doesn't have enough power. See what I'm saying? This is a wet sump. Yeah. And it was a dry sump converted to a wet sump. And it was actually only a semi-dry sump converted to a wet sump. There would have been some motorcycle police chases where bikes went 174 clocked by a plane. If owner changed sprocket, would 174 be possible? I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what motorcycle you're talking about. T, I don't know. I'd have to ask Bob. I can't remember. He told me what it was, but I don't remember what it was. I have a 5.3 LC9, 243 heads, fabricated intake, hot rod cam, and plans to put a 74 or 84 millimeter torque storm on it. My buddy said I'd be pushing my luck trying to hit 600 wheel horsepower on 93 pump gas. Is he right? I think that that's possible, but it needs to be intercooled, and you're gonna have to take timing out of it. I think you're going to be hard pressed to do that, but you should try it. Just to be clear, a 7-liter intake will not fit a 5.3. It has nothing to do with displacement and everything to do with the fact that a 7-liter is a specific port design and location, and a 5.3 is not that. A 5.3 has a cathedral port. A 7-liter has this LS7 has an LS7 specific intake and only matches to LS7 heads, not because of deck height or anything. The intake manifold will sit down on a 5.3 without any problem, but the ports won't line up. And I think maybe the bolt holes are not the same too on the LS7 because it has a raised port. Baby Shark, what's going on? They added a spacer right behind the harmonic balancer to make up for the long one. Yeah, we saw that. Factory freaks, sometimes they just work better. I've seen a Hellcat that was stock and maybe an extra 50 horsepower at the wheels than most of them did. A factory freak, sometimes they just work better. So you're saying some motors that come from the factory just for some reason make more power? I don't know how that's possible. If they have all of the same components and the machining is the same and all that stuff. Have you heard how the Texas Speedway Honey Badger cam does for pulling trailers? I don't know the specs on that cam. I've never tested one. Do you know how much the West Coast cylinder stage 1 LS7 stage 2 port job would add to a setup like this? I would doubt that it would add very much at all because it already has CNC ported LS7 heads and it has a fairly small camshaft in it, relatively speaking. So I don't know that this is not taking advantage of the cylinder heads that are there, I don't think. I have an iron LS6, flat tops, Gen 3 truck intake manifold, BTR, truck NR. I haven't dynoed it yet. 400 horsepower, 130 mile an hour car would have to be. Oh, I thought he was talking about 130 miles an hour top speed. That's how mine worked. It goes right to Bonneville and not drag racing. I recently bought a 2000 step side with a 5.3 and 373 gears. Hoping to buy a cam as soon as I find a set of tires that won't break loose so easily. Trevor, the intake manifold will definitely help. Do you have ported heads on that? Are the 243s ported or are they just as cast? It could be true if it's something like a bread van. Yeah, that might be possible. Wheel horsepower and Hellcat seem to make the most power after around 60,000 miles if they don't explode. I have somebody that's reached out to me that has a Hellcat blower adapter set up to run on an LS. So that's going to be our poll for tonight. Should I test a Hellcat blower with adapters on an LS? That will be our poll. That's perfect. Two 4.3s are just as cast. Been looking at maybe getting some 220 trick flow heads from a local guy. Those are good heads. The 220 S casts are good. Anything that you can do with that blower to make more power NA is going to be beneficial. And we've made more than 700 with the early Torque Storm blower, but on a fairly healthy combination to begin with. You know, you got to have good NA power. I recently, and we're going to have to have words, obviously. There's going to be some East Coast, West Coast thing going on here with my buddy Brian Tooley. Somebody had sent me some links to a video that he did. He did a big interview with some guys. I've seen some of it because I saw some of it posted on social media, but I didn't see these parts where Brian was talking about how every cam's not a turbo cam, which we know that that's not true. He and I can have that discussion. But also one about intake manifolds, about somehow his short runner intake manifolds somehow miraculously doing something that other short runner intake manifolds don't do under boost, that it somehow changes under boost. And that is not the case. All this in a Ford Ranger, so I really don't want more than 600 wheel horsepower. Okay. Saw Galbank's video, says turbocharger banned in boats, NASCAR, and Top Fuel. Is that so? I don't know. That was when the stuff was banned that he was talking about was a long time ago. I still don't think that they're allowed turbos in Top Fuel. It's definitely not allowed in Cup. All of those are naturally aspirated motors, so there's no form of forced induction that's allowed in NASCAR. And the boat classes that he was talking about were very specific about forced induction stuff. So it's not you can't have it in boats because there's lots of turbo stuff in boats. You can't have it in NASCAR because there's no forced induction at all in NASCAR. And in Top Fuel, they have only the positive displacement blower on there. They don't allow turbos on there. Absolutely, test. Everyone else can give their opinions. We need to hold their facts. I think on the Hellcat blower that it's going to do, I mean, as long as they can make the adapters so the blower discharges into the cylinder heads, I think we're going to see what we saw on the Cadillac blower and stuff, that where it provides boost, and boost is good. You got a shout out on that podcast. I saw that. In fact, I came to Brian's defense. Had I known these other things, I would have just left him to the wolves. No, I came to Brian's defense because somebody said some disparaging things about him. And I said, look, in the clip that you're looking at, Brian is actually saying that he's saying positive things about me. I said, and Brian and I are great friends. He's one of the few guys in this industry that I've met is like the real deal. And so, we've been friends for decades now. And he's a great guy. And so I came to Brian's defense. I said, look, dude, I said, this guy's forgotten more about camshafts than I'll ever know. And then somebody else sent me this other stuff today, and I'm like, what? What the heck is going on? I would actually like to do a video with the guys that did the thing with him. The guys that I forgot their name, but they go around to the different shops and stuff. I'd like to get on and talk to those guys. Like seeing what existing parts can do, then upgrade where needed. But honestly, I don't really need the 243s. I'm just going to run them. Cool. Is that the one where he's talking about the air hitting the back of the plenum and actually causing a lean situation in the back cylinders? No, I think that sort of description has been around forever, and I think that's reality on a boosted application, that you tend to get overfilling in the back cylinders. Guys have been talking about that with Honda designs and lots of stuff. And if you map out, some guys do it, they do it multiple ways. One way that guys do it, and this is the way that I think Brian tested it, is they put O2s in each one. And then if one of them is leaner, they go, oh, okay, that cylinder's overfilling. They're extrapolating that. And the way that I would like to see it done is I would like to have map sensors. I like to have pressure taps in every one of the cylinders, particularly down at the head would be great, so that you could see what's happening. Oh yeah, look, that one we're providing 10 pounds of boost from the blower. That one has 10.3, this one has 9.8, or whatever the differentiation is, so that you could actually go, yeah, this one is overfilling. What he was talking about is reflective wave, about the wave bouncing off the roof and him making a different design on the roof. And then also somehow that the short runner intake manifold, that it actually is a blower manifold, that somehow the short runner changes, because he's saying because of inertial ram, but I think that's a mistake. That the intake manifold gets better under boost, that it doesn't lose as much torque under boost. And for the last 30 years, the testing that I've done doesn't show that. LS3 Corvettes, I have a 2014 LSA, 5 HRE fitment problems. I have to modify serpentine other than normal LSA hood clearance and brackage. I don't know what that is. 6-liter LQ4, LQ9, added twin turbos looking for 1,000 horsepower. Thinking twin on-3 6766s are the best choice for a street car. First of all, there's no best choice. So there's lots of different turbos that will make that power output. A pair of GT3582s would do 1,000 horsepower without any problem. I've never tested those on 3s, but 67 millimeter turbos typically would make that kind of power. So 2 of those would. They're not going to be the best. I mean, you could say that to your friends all that you want. That's fine. You could do that. But there really isn't a turbo or turbos that would be better than all other turbos for your combination. There's lots of turbos that will work and do what you want to do. Just like there are lots of camshafts that will work and do what you want to do. Lots of intake manifolds, all of that stuff. You can get there a bunch of different ways. If I have an air duct on my turbo, would that reduce boost? An air duct going into it, feeding the turbo, or an air duct just that's open on the boost side? Because that would definitely reduce boost. Turbocharging top fuel, if it was allowed, presents another safety issue. Top end induction explosions. My roommate, instead of building his LS1, bought the crate LS3 495. Oh, that's the power output. Okay, I was thinking it was a displacement. I'm like, wow, that's a big boy. It's honestly a goated move. New engine, no dealing with engine builders in long times. It is. If you have the money, if you have the wherewithal to afford that stuff, and you buy something that's advertised as something and it does that or even a little more than that, that's a win. Whether or not we can all afford 15 or 20 grand or whatever for some of these crate motors, that's a different thing. I'm not in that boat. So that's why I always go to the junkyard and put a turbo on it. But if you can, and they work, that's a win. Richard, like last month, you explained the biggest difference in the LS heads is airflow characteristics. So A62s would run out sooner than 243s. A 243 head flows more than an 862 head, if that's what your question is. Why did the GM LS7 make more power than it was rated at? Because I don't know how they run it and rate that at. So it's not they're sandbagging or whatever conspiracy theory thing the guys will put out there into internet world. I don't know how they run it, and we went over that at the beginning. I don't know if they run it with stock exhaust manifolds. I don't know if they run it when they're rating it at that power level. I don't know if they rate it with full accessories or full exhaust, or some tune that they run that doesn't optimize the power. If they're purposely being conservative on the tune so that they know that if anybody ever runs it, it makes more power. I don't know any of that information. And without that information, I can't comment on that accurately. My stock LM7 53 and my 64 Biscayne made 300 wheel horsepower on the factory tune. Does that seem unreasonable? Headers and alternator as the only accessories. Do you have a factory ECU where it's making 300 wheel horsepower? Because a stock 5.3 doesn't normally make 300 wheel horsepower. If you have a 4-speed car, it's going to make a little more. And then if you have fewer accessories, it should make a little more. I don't know if you have headers on it. You have headers, and alternator is the only accessory. Yeah, that's probably realistic then. With a manual trans and long tube headers and almost no accessories other than the alternator and the water pump, that's probably a real number. Well, it is a real number because you got that. I've been told titanium rods are worth 40 to 50 horsepower more because of lighter mass over steel rods. I would be surprised if you would be able to measure it. It might be some, but it's not going to be that much. 1,500 horsepower 5.3. Which turbo would you use? Are you just wanting to use a single one? I don't know what single turbo I would use because I've never tried to make 1,500 with a single turbo. There's probably lots of them out there that are rated at that. When we did it, we did twins. We did twin S475s. With both of those are near 1,000 horsepower. So we had about 2,000 horsepower with a turbo to play with, which put our 1,500 horsepower, 1,540, right in kind of a sweet spot for those turbos. Engine was sitting for a while. How bad is the surface rust on cams? Not normally bad on a cam unless it was outside and was exposed to like damp air, because the cam when it ran last had a bunch of oil on it. So it would have to be there a long time and it'd have to be exposed to moisture for the cam to be rusty. Richard, what should I do to my LMG 5.3 Gen 4 LS to support an M90 supercharger to make it reliable for daily driving? I would put ring gap in it. You're going to have to put bigger injectors in it because if it makes more power, you're going to need more fuel, particularly if you're going to run E85. But otherwise, nothing. I mean, and you probably could get away with running low boost on that thing without even doing the ring gap on it. It probably would be okay. See if I can get it to. Forged crank and rods recommended. Budget 1,000 horsepower turbo build that you might pick. I would go to the Summit Pro LS stuff if you want to do that. For the 1,000 horsepower, you really don't need forged stuff. I mean, it's better, but the Summit Pro LS stuff is good. I'd like to see a junkyard LS build with aluminum connecting rods instead of nothing else, except for one of the cams. I don't know if I've ever run a motor with aluminum rods in it. On all cylinders, states 270 to 295. That number is a flywheel number. The SAE test is with full exhaust and accessories. I know what the OEM stuff does when they test their motors. When they test their production motors that go in cars. This is not that, though. This is an aftermarket GM performance crate motor. And so it's not tested the same way, I don't think. Is the wheel horsepower loss in automatic and manual the same? They're not. It's less in a manual trans. Richard, are you following Eric's cam challenge? No, is he? I mean, I know about it, and we've been talking about it for a long time. But is he doing it now? Is he getting dyno results yet? Single or twins, which one would be better? There's no better. You can make the power that you want with a single if it's big enough. You can make the power with twins. You can get the twins and the singles to do exactly the same things if you size them to do exactly the same thing. Most people pick single or twins based on fitment. Can you fit a gigantic turbo in wherever you need to have to put the turbo? Is it easier for you to put twins in there? Is it cooler for you when you're saying I have a twin turbo motor rather than I have a turbo motor? That's a big thing. It's symmetrical. It looks better when you pop the hood. All of these questions are there, but power is not one of them. You can make the power with either one of them. Could more exact engine balancing get horsepower? How about blueprinted deck port match? A factory balance job is actually pretty close. If it's within 5 grams or whatever, and you do those 5 grams, I doubt you'd even be able to measure that in terms of power output on the dyno. If you blueprint everything to this is the kind of thing that's done when I used to showroom stock race. These are all of the things that you would look at. You're like, okay, what is the actual service limit of this thing? And a lot of times the people that are making the rules don't go by that. They go by their own rules. So can you, if the piston's down in the hole, can you zero deck the motor? Can you have it come out a little bit? Can you put low tension rings? All of these cheater kind of ways to optimize it. And you could do all of that stuff and make the motor maybe make a little bit more power. Are aluminum rods better than plastic ones? I think better than carbon fiber ones, right? Who votes no to cool stuff like that? I know, 92%. It's only 92%. So there's 8% of the people don't want to see a Hellcat blower combination. For AutoMac, I'd say a stall converter helps. I know it did for me. Yeah, a converter will definitely add. It's not technically adding power, I guess, but it would definitely improve performance. Factory PCM with nothing but VATS Elite 91 octane, hoping to do some port work and camshaft over the winter. Cool. 17% loss for manual trans and rear end gears. That's not an accurate assessment. It's never a fixed percentage on anything. L92 build, need to buy rings and add gap. Any preference on style and brand of rings? Going to add a Whipple supercharger. I would look at the guys at Total Seal for rings for that. Eric is testing them in early October. Okay. Mirrored twins look good. They do. Twins are always good. I made a fabricated 304 stainless steel 3/8 return standpipe in the 454 Gen 6 pickup. Made 11 inches long and away 12 inches from the bottom. Drag fuel. No air bubbles now. Oh, so this is the fuel return thing? That's cool. Here we go. Gearbox will have a different efficiency, even brand new gearboxes versus ones that are broken in. All of that stuff affects it. And each gearbox has its own amount of loss. So you can't say that a T5 is this, or a Honda front wheel drive gearbox, like a 5-speed, is the same as a T56 or a Lenco or whatever other thing that you want to put. Same thing with rear ends. Like, is every rear end the same? No. Is a 7.5, does it cost as much power to drive, or a Honda transaxle? Does it cost as much to drive as an 8.8 or a 9-inch or a 12 bolt or, anything like that? And then what gears do you have in it? All of that stuff is new to the channel, but do you work for the public? You mean, what is it you are asking me to do? Like build motors and stuff? Because I don't have a shop and I don't do that. I'm here to give you information to help you get your stuff done, though. It made a difference driving tonight. A proper fabricated install return standpipe in a 16-gallon Jazz. Oh, so is it the return line from the regulator or something that you're talking about? Hellcat blower on the Metro. That's a lot of blower. That blower is probably bigger than the Metro motor. Isn't the Hellcat blower all about seeing what a blower with X amount of CFM, meaning you could pick any brand blower that's the same size for testing? You could, if we have that blower that's a particular displacement, we could get a really good idea what that thing is capable of. I mean, we already know on a Hellcat what it does. So we'd have a pretty good idea. It's not always just that. Sometimes it's just cool because we took a Hemi blower and put it on a LS. We swapped it. But the cat blower, the pulley would sound amazing. They always sound better when you wick them up. Twins look good, but so does a big old single. My buddy's about to install a 93-102 on his 2014 SS. Can't wait to see it. I think anymore now, I think modern like 88s will do 1,500 horsepower. He does more work for the public than the government. Yep, that's why some drag racers are running turbo hydro 200s over turbo 400s. It's all about parasitic loss. Yeah, I think that the 400 there's more loss than there is on a 350. I think that I remember guys arguing about that back in the day. The hurricane made a mess, so I had to deal with that first, but I got some stuff done in the car today. Hellcat Metro. With twin turbos versus single, two should have more kids than one. I rebuilt the Mallory pump for fuel pressure regulator to have to wait to install proper PTFE lines and fittings. Are you going to run E85 on that, BNR? What is the max horsepower you can get from an OEM small block 350 turbocharged with forged internals? I don't know. I don't know what the record of what anybody has done, but on a stock block, I think I think we've gone to 1,000 horsepower or so. But if you look at Grubworm's deal, that's an LT1 block, and I think that they've gone way over that on the stock block. I keep coming across Vortex for really good prices that suit my engine. I really want turbos, but it's so easy to get a longer serpentine belt and bolt on the Vortex and keep boosting. You can do that, and that works good. I just would remember that belt slippage is a thing, and the more that you try to maximize the speed and the output of that blower, the bigger chance you have. In fact, I was earlier today and yesterday, I was looking at the photos I have of the Boneyard boost story that I did on the big block. And I noticed that we used part of the reason that it went so well and went so quickly is that, and particularly when we were trying to tune a carburetor, which we were blowing through the CSU carburetor, but the blower worked fabulously because we had a cog belt on it and it never slipped. It's really hard to slip with a cog belt unless you break the belt. And so all of that worked perfectly repeatable every time. And it made the boost and the power that it was supposed to, and it did that flawlessly. And I can't say that about every time we use a serpentine belt. Do you run a fuel flow meter on the dyno? They do have a fuel flow. They have turbines on the dyno that work when we run it carbureted. Went for a quick ride in my junkyard turbo 351. Nice. Was in the 210s coolant temp within 12 minutes of city driving. It seems like a lot for just cruising around. How do you configure headers to get a flat crank sound from an LS? Could you do it with 180 degree headers or something? I think that Calvin did that. I was thinking of using 8896 and a 1.5 divided housing. The turbo guys, Robert over at Force Performance or Viren, any of those guys should be able to help you with a single that will do that. If you get a real turbo, like a real, what am I thinking of? A Garrett or something like that, they'll make a lot more power with their sizing than a lot of the stuff from China will. These dash 8 and bung fitting on top of the fuel cell. At first, no standpipe dropping down the fuel. Lots of air bubbles present. Standpipe installed. All the bubbles are gone. Good. We don't want bubbles. We want fuel. Hellcat, LSA, M90, centrifugal Whipple, YN, twin scroll, twin screw. All of those you want to run? Richard, I like E85 though. We have E10. Okay. I don't want to have to worry about the rubber race hoses going bad. Yeah. One and done. That's right. Chris Boyette just went 7s with a factory rod crank short block 6.2. A 6.2 LS or a 6.2 Ford? Ultimate supercharger test. Well, I can tell you that all of those and an M90 are not going to be comparable. And a centrifugal will make more peak power than all those others. And a Whipple is already a twin screw. So if you were wanting to combine both of those, and the twin screw will make more than the roots blowers will. If you size them all the same. Getting the inlet to those positive displacement blowers and getting that to be equal would be difficult. Richard, what cylinder heads would you recommend for a 5.7 LS with a 233 cam? I use 102 fast, stock bottom end. Should I port 241s or 243s or go aftermarket? You can port 241s or 243s to basically make what the aftermarket heads do. So if that's a cheaper way to go, you could do that. I don't know that you'd be using all of what the head would have to offer after you port it, because a lot of those heads will go over 300 CFM. And it'd be highly unlikely that you're with a stock bottom end that you're going to make 600 horsepower or more than that. But the cam choice is going to come down to what you want that motor to do. Do you just want it to make a big peak power number? Are you driving it? Do you have a stock converter? What car is it in? What RPM range do you want to run? My 70 Trans Am Rammer 4.4-speed is going to be 13.5, E85 only way to drive. That would be good. Yeah. Otherwise, race gas is way too expensive. Would you consider a Blueprint engine or bottom end if you had 7,000? Yeah, I think I've had nothing but good luck with the Blueprint stuff. I've never had anything go bad with any of their things. I've tested quite a few of their motors. Looking to build a 383 small block Chevy. Those are good. Better than a 350. Wanting to get 650 horsepower out of it. Before going over what all the things that you need for that, what is it you're going to do with that? Because a 650 horsepower 383 is not going to be very drivable. It's going to be a really big cam. It's going to have a lot of compression. It's going to take good gas. It's going to have CNC ported heads. It's going to have a lot of stuff in it. A 6.2, LT. Okay. Yeah, I've seen the LT power numbers that guys are making, and it's like 850 or something now. It's a lot. Saw your stroker versus turbo LS for a few weeks ago, which would be more fuel efficient at equal horsepower initial cost versus long-term cost. I don't know all of that. I can tell you that at wide open throttle, while you're making power, the turbo combination will use more fuel because it runs richer while it's doing that. An NA motor you could run at 12.8. A turbo combination is going to be 11.8, maybe 11.5, maybe even richer than that. So it's going to be using more fuel to make that same amount of power, but you're not going to be cruising that around like at wide open throttle. So if you do a stroker and you're cruising it, probably the fuel mileage would be better on a turbo LS than it would be on a big stroker. Speedway gas stations have E85. I'd love to see one of the twin scroll 4.7 blowers tested on LSs and Coyotes. What's a twin scroll 4.7 blower? A twin screw, is that what you mean? Are Chevy performance motors California legal? I don't know. You have to talk with the GM guys and see if that's the case. Using the Summit Pro LS 6-liter crank and rods, what stroke for 1,000 horsepower build? I wouldn't put a forged crank in it. You can if they have them. Using the Summit Pro LS 6-liter crank and rods, what stroke for the 1,000 horsepower? I would stay with a standard stroke crank. You don't need a stroker thing to make 1,000 horsepower. You can do that with a 4.8 and a turbo. So you don't need lots of displacement. Main and rod bearing brand preference. I don't have a preference. I think there's a lot of good ones. Just measure it and make sure the bearing clearance is proper. Use on a turbo, you're talking carb versus injection. Should injection be able to lean out the air fuel? My discussion with the guy that was asking about the stroker was only about cruise fuel mileage. But it was also, the first discussion was at wide open throttle. A turbo combination or a supercharged combination is going to be running richer than an NA combination that makes the same amount of power. So if you have an NA motor, like a stroker motor, like a 408 that makes 625, and you have a turbo 5.3 that makes 625 under boost, it's going to be 11.5 to 1. The NA combination is going to be 12 and a half or 13 to 1. So when it makes that power, it's going to use less fuel to do that. But that's at wide open throttle, and that's not where people are measuring fuel mileage. For the 408 to be able to make that power, it's going to have, it has more displacement. It's going to have more frictional losses. It's going to have a bigger cam. It's going to probably have more compression. It's going to have high flow heads. It's going to have some kind of intake manifold on it. And so while cruising down the road at 70 miles an hour, it's going to use more fuel than a turbo cruising down the road, not in boost, under the same conditions. Why is the AA Pro Charger so popular on vets? Hardly see any turbo vets. Part of the problem with turbocharging the Corvette chassis is fitment under the hood. There's not a lot of real estate there. And the A&A guys have designed kits with a Pro Charger and a Vortec so that it packages there, and it's harder to package turbos. Got 99% of everything to install a turbo on my XR6. Just waiting on some fittings for the fuel rail. Cool. Do you know much about 823 heads? Yep, that come on CNG motors. I don't know about the CNG motors. I don't know what would be different about them. Do they have different size chambers? I don't have any. I've never even seen a CNG motor. Kenny Bell makes a 4.2 and Whipple, I believe, makes a 4.7. Kenny Bell makes one bigger than a 4.7 also. So a bigger blower, more airflow, more power. Thousand horsepower twin turbo gas in 85. What's your injector recommendation? Your 80s will do gas. It will do 1,000 horsepower in gas. It will just do that. I would pick some 1500s or something, or some 2000s. They're going to have to be big injectors to make 1,000 horsepower with the 85. When does the guy look in the mirror and say, it's time to pull this engine that's let me down for years? Has it been letting you down for years and years and years? That would be easy to do. Since 2017, it's time. What motor is it, and what's in it, and what else do you have to put in there? Do you have a replacement? All right, T, we'll see you later. Our poll is at 88%. That's it. Come on, guys. How can you not want to see a Hellcat blower? That's just nonsense. What motorcycle would you go with on the SPC looking to make? What was that? I didn't get that. Greetings from the UK. What's going on? Classic 2-liter twin cam, Fiat Lancia. Nice. 8-valve. Garrett swap for Mitsubishi TD04 twin scroller. All that's good. I'm a Lancia fan, especially the Delta Integrale. A turbo is just volumetric efficiency on demand. That's the nice thing about it for cruise conditions, is that you're not driving anything really like you are with a blower, a centrifugal or a roots blower or whatever, or twin screw kind of thing. You're always driving that. You're bypassing a lot of it if you have a bypass valve. But with a turbo, there's no load. There's no pressure. You have a blow off valve anyway, even if you did, but you don't have that. So you're just cruising, and it's almost an NA motor in that condition. Chris, I don't know what you mean by thoughts. The Hellcat Supercharger 7 is actually a Mercedes-Benz unit, I called. There's going to be a review for the new BTR truck Haas cam. I think Brian's already tested it. I mean, it should do what a cam that has those kinds of specs do. That's not a truck cam. That's a 400-inch cam, 400-inch stroker cam. Hellcat blower on a 5-liter. In racing, how many hours of use is typical before power falling off? It depends on what motor you're talking about and how and what form of racing. Are you talking about road racing? Are you talking about cup? Are you talking about drag racing? What are you talking about? What motor size did you go with? Looking to make 650 horsepower out of a small block? You're making 650 horsepower NA? Then I would go with the biggest one that you can find. I would go with an aftermarket block, like a Dart block or something, and make a big one. It's a lot easier to make 650 horsepower out of a motor that's 450 inches rather than one that's 350 inches. Be careful. GM forced a lot of the guys at Performance Division out in the last 24 months. What should I be careful about? I'm excited about BTR's new heads. I know those look good. I haven't run any of those yet, but we were talking about putting a set on the 5.3 that I have. I'm excited about, let's see, GT3582 on a 5.4 4-valve eventually. It'll be positioned next to the bell housing. Are you just using a single one of those on the 5.4? BMW uses vacuum-operated wastegates to reduce back pressure. Wastegates open until boost is needed, reduces pumping losses. Makes sense. An old gas dump truck would wear a motor out in 3 years. 6.2 LS with 176,000 miles. Leave the cam bearings alone if they look okay. Yeah, my truck's got twice that. So my 5.3 truck has twice that. So I think you're good. So the Truck Boss would be a good fit for a 408 stroker over the Truck Norris cam. No, it depends on what you're trying to get done. I think that Truck Boss cam is a lot bigger than a Truck Norris, and it's not going to idle as well. It's not going to have the low-speed power. The Truck Haas. BTR LS Truck Haas cam. Designed for use in cathedral and rec port heads. I thought you could only pick one. 400 to 416 inch cubic inch truck applications. Recommended compression ratio of 10.5 to 1 for use on poke. It's ideal for a daily driver as well as some light duty towing. It will also work with most stock converters. It's a 219, 230 something. Developed from hundreds of hours in-house cam lobe design and Spintron testing. This cam offers the reliability and durability you have come to expect from BTR. Well, now that I see that, I think it needs to be compared to the Truck Norris. I don't have a 400 inch motor to test it on, but that's not going to matter. I'll bet you that a Truck Norris makes more low speed power than that camshaft. Going to give the 5.3 some love. It's earned after you've rode it hard and put it away. Yeah, it has a lot of miles on it, but it keeps running. For 1,000 horsepower twins, so we need to run E85. It would be better. I don't know that you're going to be able to do 1,000 horsepower on 93. What would your third option for a turbo junkyard engine build after the Gen 3 and 4, 4.8, 5.8? What would be your common engine pick behind the... I don't know. Are you asking what would I pick besides an LS? Is that what you're asking? Because an LS might not be my go-to thing depending on what I was putting it in and what I was trying to get done. I mean, the Turbo 8.1, if you wanted a motorhome thing or a truck for towing or something, that thing would be pretty stellar. I've heard opposite of the Chevy tall deck, also a tall deck 454 Gen 6 or Gen 4 and Gen 6. They'd never seen those in person. Hard to kill a 366 or a 427. I've never seen a tall deck 454, but I have seen the others. Lots of 366s and 427s. Steve, is your question, do I have an Omni? Yes, I have an Omni. Do you think a Cadillac canceled Cadillac canceled production of the twin turbo Cadillac engine because GM wanted it for the Z06 and ZR1 C8. I didn't know that Cadillac was involved in that, and I didn't know that that would be a separate division of them building performance motors for other cars. If you're gonna, I don't think I have an answer to this question. If you're gonna purposely design a cam for fuel efficiency, nothing else, what things would you look for? I think that I would mirror it off of something that I saw in the Honda stuff. You know, if it was a 4-valve deal, I would open the valves up at different points. It would be a very low lift. It would be a very low duration thing. Because you would try to also, in addition to making the valve events what you want them for fuel efficiency, which I honestly don't know. I don't know under a steady state cruise what you'd actually want to do with the cam to maximize cruise only fuel mileage. I would think that it would be to open the valve up as little as possible and have the motor only make the power that's required to achieve the necessary power to go that speed under that load. But I don't know that that's the case. I don't know enough about like fuel efficiency cam design, fuel efficiency only cam design to make that work. What parts wear more on an NA LS versus turbo versus supercharger? I don't know. Big Bang 366 turbo diesel turbocharged would be fun. Tall deck for I don't think a tall deck is the way to go if I was building a turbo big block. I don't know if that block is any stronger than a standard deck block. Guys say a tall deck 450 was made, but it's rare. So is it? Whenever people talk about this stuff, my question is always, okay, did they make one that they have the people at the block foundry make one because they wanted to look at it or test it or whatever? That doesn't count as a production block. Even like the Reynolds aluminum blocks that they made for Can-Am and stuff, those are not production blocks. The production blocks like the ZL1 stuff, that's a production block, albeit very, very limited. And it's not like you're going to see a whole bunch of those. Same thing with the LA88 or LA89 aluminum heads. They made those, but there's not a lot of them. I mean, probably the LA89 stuff, there would be more of those than the LA88 stuff. But a lot of these things that guys talk about, it's not like a production thing. So for me, it's not in the same discussion as like that you talk about production things. The 8.1496 is a tall deck. Yeah, but it's a whole different engine family than the big block family is. From the research I did, the LS 427 570 numbers from GM were from a test engine with no accessories except the water pump, Corvette LS7 exhaust manifolds, and the Z28 intake elbow and air box. So where did you find that information? Less volumetric efficiency means you can use less fuel. I know that we would want, I don't know if the cam timing would allow us to do this, but you want more throttle opening to get rid of those pumping losses. So maybe running at wide open throttle and throttling it with valve timing, which is possible for cruise efficiency. And then I would be more, because I think that the cam plays less of an effect on that. But things like lean burn, using less fuel to do that definitely plays it. Getting rid of parasitic loss, getting rid of the aerodynamic drag, all that stuff will definitely play a part. I have an 83 tall deck 427. It's definitely built heavier, at least 100 pounds more. It should weigh more because there's more mass there, but I don't know if it's actually stronger than in the areas that we would be concerned with when making power. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't know anybody that knows that for certain. Like, I don't know any of the engineers that have tested that stuff. Maybe they've done durability or power testing with it. The reason I'm asking is I'm looking to putting in a 6-liter LY6 with a 6L90 into a Cadillac Fleetwood. So that's why you're asking about fuel mileage? I think if a VVT cam is going to be more fuel efficient than a non-VVT cam. Marketing material, pictures from promotional material, and a YouTube video from Chevrolet Performance with the engine on a test stand. Okay, cool. That's good information if they did it like that. And we kind of figured when we were talking about at the beginning of this that they tested in a different configuration than we tested in, which is, 86% want to see the Hellcat blower. That's good. We got one more minute. Have you run twin GT3582s on a 6-liter? I don't think so, but we know that those turbos will support more than 1,000 horsepower. In fact, a lot of guys think that a single one of those will support 600 horsepower. So they'll definitely support, you'll definitely be able to make 1,000 flywheel horsepower with twin 3582s. Small diesel engine is a generator for electric motor. That's how you maximize fuel efficiency. Yeah, you could do a hybrid. Old forums, truck pulling, they state 366 and 427s are stronger prior to aftermarket blocks. Cool. Did run across some stuff from one of the GM engineers that said they picked up 20 horsepower and tested with long tubes. That doesn't surprise me, having tested headers on LS. In fact, we did a test on a 427, and I can tell you what that did. Stock exhaust manifolds versus headers, and 20 horsepower is not out of the range of possibility. I think that's kind of right there. Okay, it's not that one. This is the 427. Here's 638 versus 669 was the stock exhaust manifolds versus long tubes. Wait a second here. Hang on. It's actually a little bit more than that. 681. 638 versus 681. So it's quite a bit. So this was on a 427 stroker LS7 headed deal. Saw Trinity Performance was offering pre-orders on adapters for the Hellcat to LS. Only 12 miles per gallon, and that big Cadillac's heavy and not very aerodynamic. Old forum cylinder walls and decks are the same thickness and very light cam tunnels. Not centered. Had to sonic check them still. .427 tall deck makes a great 510 engine stroker. How are they achieving that? Is the wall thickness like the are the cylinders thicker or the sleeves thicker on a truck block? And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. Hopefully you guys are having a good weekend, and I will see you guys all tomorrow.